All right, welcome everyone to another Logical Gamers podcast. My name is Blanka Kong, and I'm joined with Mr. Esoteric Skills of Logical Gamers, Gunnar Eos, and Zeta Kaiser. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Elden Ring. The game comes out in a few weeks, and we wanted to take some time to talk about what we hope to see in the game, what we hope we don't see in the game, and everything in between. So, disclaimer, there might be spoilers in this episode. Now, I have stayed away from most Elden Ring media. Like, I haven't seen any videos. I've tried to stay away from articles. I haven't watched any streams. I know there was a network test a little while ago that I tried to get in, but I couldn't. So I didn't consume any like visual content on whatever that entailed. And I think that's for the best because I want my experience to be as blind as possible so I get the most out of that game. So there's that. There's your disclaimer, people. So if you don't want to hear any potential spoilers, I will click off the video or
Leaving a like.
leave a like. We'd appreciate it. But yeah, I don't want to spoil it for anybody because I wouldn't want anybody to spoil it for me. Even though that's potentially possible based on the other three people here with me tonight. So I guess I'll start off. Let me pull up my notes here. And so I have a few bullet points, right? The main thing, or one of the main things that I hope is still relevant in the game or still present, is the difficulty, right? Dark Souls games are known to be challenging games, right? And so I want that to stay the same. I know that there's like a movement or a certain group of players that want an easier or more welcoming experience, and I get that, but I don't want that to taint what I feel a Souls experience should be. So that's one thing that I hope remains true is challenging fair but challenging difficulty from the bosses, the level design, even the basic enemies. Like everything needs to be a threat because that's kind of how all these games have been. So that's my first like thing that I would like to see in the game. You guys have any thoughts on that or?
Uh,
Um, I agree 100%. I mean, uh, From Software has provided us the game from jump as a difficult game. Very challenging. It's not that it's unbeatable. It's just you need to take the time to kind of
To learn the game.
overcome all the obstacles
Yeah.
that are, put in front of you. So that was actually one of my points as well. So I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying.
yeah, man. I think difficulty needs to be ever present. That's just a staple with the Souls games, and I don't think Elden Ring should be any different. You know, like you hinted at earlier, Kong, that there are certain individuals in the gaming space, we'll call them, that want these games to have a dedicated easy mode, and I just think that fundamentally violates the spirit of From Software. Like they've established a tempo for their games. Their games are, as mentioned, not impossible to beat. It's pretty much just memorization game. Very few bosses in the Soul series have random effects to them. It's pretty much like you know what this swing does. This this enemy has a breath attack that goes from left to right. So like if you can pick up on the pattern recognition, you can beat a boss without, getting touched. I've seen it happen before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm all down for difficulty. It's not the game's fault if you spread your stats across 12 different categories and you feel like you're weak. That's not the game's fault. If the game does a bad job of explaining it, then you can make an argument for that. But if you just want to, put every stat down the line and then you wonder why you're getting one shot, well, that's you. That's not the game. So, yeah, I'm hoping this is just as challenging, just as, exciting as the Soulsborne series has been so far and the Sekiro game, I should say.
Nah,
All right.
I want it to be
Zeta?
full on easy mode. Let's go. Hold my hand, do everything for me. One button combos. I want it all. I want the power fantasy of being the best. I'm joking. I do not want it all.
Some people, some people were like, yeah, what he said.
True,
I,
and
I want
and
that. I want it to stay the same way that it has been, or relatively the same way, because there's been more. I want to say, I guess, free movement as the games have gone on. Like if you just like compare like Demon Souls, Dark Souls, all the way up to where we're at now, what Sekiro.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
latest.
like if you compare it to that, there's a lot more just more movement. Is just like the best way I would describe it, as
yeah,
opposed to just chunkily rolling around.
Well,
yeah,
it's
a lot
it's
more
it's
fluidity.
movement. Yeah, fluidity. That's the perfect word. And
Yeah,
also, it's less clunky, right? Like if you play original Demon Souls on PS3, like I think that's my favorite one. But I'm not blind to its faults. Like the game is, you know, functionally not perfect. It's pretty bad actually. Like the collision detection on certain platforms and the certain animations are just super slow, or just it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it isn't smooth. um that's not what that kind of difficulty is not what I'm looking for, because a lot of people construed that fact where it's like, oh well, you just like the games because they're just hard to play. And it's like, no, I like the fluidity of something like Bloodborne or Sekiro. I
Yeah.
think those games are fantastic.
Hmm.
But you know um I still appreciate Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 and 2 just the same. It's just I can admit that, yeah, those games aren't perfect. Like there are flaws with you
but
know
they're still functioning. It's not like
but
there's
they can function. I mean, for the most part they work. So
yeah,
Yeah,
you find a way to overcome that. That what the games being clunky to some degree wasn't a part of the difficulty design, right? It wasn't.
yeah,
They didn't do that on purpose to make the game hard. That's just kind of how the game
they work
came
with what
out.
they had at the time.
yeah. There
Right.
was hardware limitations at that time, and as hardware progresses, things get easier to kind of create and generate. So
Yeah.
I can
Even without
completely
like the
understand that.
hardware problems, it's just like that's for them at the time. That was their. Just, I don't want to say it's new because they have similar games like that, like the Super Nintendo game, and I forgot what it was that was on PS2. I forgot what it was called. The thing with the
was like
who showed it?
it was like a first person
Yeah,
shooter yeah, that weird
yeah,
game.
yeah. But beyond that, they was
uh,
making Armored Core, so it was like the entire genre was something new for them. So it was just like there was obviously going to be hiccups involved and just
they also
things that
worked
they
on
weren't
like the Kingsfield games and like what's that, Heart of Tower of Lost Heart Shadow something on PS1. It's basically like Kingsfield's like a first person dungeon crawler RPG.
Okay.
um which is something I like to play because I never played it, and I recently downloaded it on PS3 because it's a PS1 classic. On there, the physical game is very expensive, so I
Gotta
opted for the
imagine.
cheaper option. But but yeah, let's okay, so we've established that. Is there any points that you guys want to bring up?
Yeah, mine's kind of hyper specific. Um, I hope in Elden Ring, magic is good, and
Hmm.
I know I'll catch flack for that because everyone's like, oh, you play because just for clarification, every Souls game I've always started as a mage, except for Demon Souls because I didn't know any better. Like back then when I played Demon Souls, it was like, what the fuck is this game? This shit is brand new. Let me go with my shield to feel safe.
Hmm.
And I don't have a 5, so I can't play the remake yet. But from Dark Souls through Bloodborne, sorry, with the exception of Sekiro, I've always played a mage. And for those who've played mages, there's like been huge discrepancies in mage. It feels like they were super powerful in Dark Souls, like absurdly powerful. You got like the right setup and you got the right gear early on, you just dominated that game. Like for those who know, like once you got the Moonlight Greatsword, it's scaled off of intelligence. So at that point, you had a hard hitting physical weapon with your magic. Like magic was nuts in that game. Two, it was okay. It was hard to get going. I had to do some roundabout stuff for resetting or promoting certain zones to New Game Plus just so I can get certain rings. I had to do some whole roundabout shit to make Magic work. And in three, Magic got beat over the head with a Nerf hammer. Like they changed it to an MP bar, which was a first for the series as a whole, because back then Magic was kind of like Final Fantasy 1, where it was usages. But now in 3, they had an actual MP bar you could use. But Magic was slow to build up. A lot of things in the beginning of the game were actually resistant to Magic. So, you had to try really hard to make Magic work. And once you got past like the mid level of the game, Magic started to pop off, but it never hit the Dark Souls 1 levels. So I
But that
think,
golden days.
yeah, it was just like fucking. If anybody ever plays Dark Souls 1 in this group again, or if anybody's listening, try a Magic build, and you'll see like that's the closest you get to easy mode on Dark Souls. I'll admit that. I'm not even gonna front. But
Yeah, I played it. What was it? Last year November. Um, or actually the November before, and I didn't do the magic build, so maybe while it's still fresh in my mind, probably I'll try a magic
it's
build
in,
because I'm
it's
the quite
insane.
opposite.
Yeah, if you play 3, it's hard. Play 1 is super easy. But just and to end it off, I know I don't know much about Elden Ring, and that's by design. But I know magic does exist. There is a sorcerer starting class. I don't know if there's an MP bar or if it's the usages. Um, so, but I know it exists. And I'm just hoping that I don't want it to be overpowered and I don't want it to be bottom of the barrel. I just like it in the nice middle ground. I get it's tougher because, I'm a mage. I'm super fragile by default. I don't invest in HP like a big beefy warrior guy does. But yeah, I'm just hoping it's in a nice middle ground and I can start a magic build right off the bat and there's good spells and it's fun because I love playing mage builds in the Souls games. So yeah, that's my hyper specific hopes and dreams.
Okay, well, to kind of go off of that, that's basically the same thing I had because I did look up some things. So like you said, there are classes, and so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I looked at them, and I don't think it's too much of a spoiler just to say the name, but
Well, it exists. So yeah, I mean it's
like the
not.
one thing is called the Enchanted Knight, which is I'm going to assume is the mage like class because it has a staff. So unless you sort of start bonking people with a wooden stick, okay, but going to go along with that is the mage, which is what I said I wanted to do because the the tried and true method is usually build strength and just hit things harder.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So that's what I was hoping for. I was hoping that it would be sort of like in the middle, not for magic per se, but because it's called Enchanted Knight, I'm hoping it's be like I could be paladin-esque. So I can
Yeah,
have
like a
like,
battle mage.
yeah, that's what I would prefer it be. So that's what I'm like more interested in as opposed to it's called Bloody Wolf, but I'm just gonna say it's a soldier basically because it had the sword. So like as opposed to being something like that, like I wanna just branch out a little bit because usually that's what I do. I go with the give me big beat stick and win.
So
So
that
so are you? I'm sorry.
yeah.
Are you referring to like magic as in enchanting weapons, or you're looking also for like shooting projectiles and like
I
you
want to
look?
shoot projectiles and stuff like that, but like
Okay,
I'm just going by it's like I said, I didn't really look at things as far as videos are concerned. I just looked up like news articles and stuff like that, and it's called Enchanted Knight, so it shows you with a staff. But when I hear knight, I
Right.
immediately think of like paladin, like where it's like I have
yeah,
magic, but I can fight if I need to.
makes
Hmm.
sense.
That's very interesting because the Souls games have always had classes, but all it really did was influence what gear you started with and where your
Your
stats were
base stats.
allocated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
why like the more hardcore Souls peoples, they would always go deprived because deprived was 10 across the board. So it was pretty much a blank slate that you can build from scratch. The thing is it started basically completely naked. That
Yeah.
was the trade-off. So the fact that but there was never an actual class, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was never an actual class that was kind of a paladin. From my understanding, you always built usually a knight, and then you started investing points into intelligence or faith, depending on usually faith. And then you kind of built a paladin. So
Yeah,
if what you're
exactly.
saying is
Yeah.
yeah,
To my
okay.
recollection.
So
Yeah.
if what you're saying is true, that's actually pretty cool because now there seems to be an actual starting class that starts on the road to being a hybrid physical and magical user. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, as I said, that's what I am hoping for. Like I said, I didn't watch any videos on them. I just know what the classes are called because I just looked them up. and like, but they have them separate, so there is just a warrior. So that would have been
Mm.
something to go back more to the what you was talking about earlier, to be like, I guess, more traditional of building it up. But they also have a prophet, which I don't know what that would. I guess that would be more of a pure mage.
That
A
sounds.
Could be.
healer,
That's the thing. I don't know if
maybe.
the same stats still applies. Apply. So that sounds like a faith build.
Could be that. Yeah, it could be faith, white magic, air quotes, or black magic, like just fireballs and I don't know. Pyromancer makes a
Yeah,
return.
that's the
Who
thing. Yeah, I don't.
knows? Who
Yeah.
knows? Who knows
Yeah,
what
Uh,
that looks like?
yeah,
Um, that's interesting. So I mean, I'm down if there's like a starting class for guys like you that want to have a little bit of both. That way you don't have to like, oh, let me get this knight and put 10 points in intelligence so I can use this magic properly. Like he comes
Yeah,
with the knight armor and a spell.
I gotta force myself to read a book while holding my giant sword, just so I can
Yeah.
have some
So
fire.
yeah, so dope. Hopefully you get the class you want. I'm just going pure mage, little stick, dies in one hit probably, but I got that magic. So he's
As long
hoping
as
they
you don't
got
look
it.
at me funny, I win.
Yeah.
So to piggyback off of that whole, because we're on the topic of like classes and whatever. One of my things, and like you guys can cut me off at any point if you want to like interject a point. New types of weapons, gadgets, and magic. So
Mm.
um, what I would like to see is not just dedicated mage classes and dedicated like more diversity with the with what your build can be as far as like what these titles are, right? Because I mean, the Souls games have usually, depending on which one we're talking, probably excluding Sekiro, um, you have like a pretty diverse, um, like amount of options to like how you build your character. You can do a lot of mix and matching, which is cool.
yeah,
But I would like to see more, even more diversity, right? Where it's like there's different like class types of magic, right? Where water magic does something vastly different to fire magic, and fire magic is, or like earth magic is even crazier, right? And like um is more powerful if you're a knight or a warrior who uses earth magic. Like a little more, just more options would be nice. And I might be asking for too much there, because the game already gives you a lot of options. But because I've played all the Souls games since Demon Souls, there's a lot of like samey
yeah,
options. So it's like,
yeah,
okay, I'm either a knight or like a beefy like berserker warrior or a mage. That's kind of like, and there's some like overlap there, like you can be hybrids, but that's like
Yeah.
kind of like where it goes. It's like one of three routes, and I'd like to see that expanded a little more, especially seeing that like I feel that from software is trying to like reboot what Souls games are, because if they had just made this Dark Souls 4, that might be intimidating for a lot of people because it's like, oh, I haven't even played the first three. Whereas if it's Elden Ring, so it's like it's a new thing, and in it being a new IP, I think welcomes new players, because I've heard that argument where people say, oh, Dark Souls 3, I haven't even played the first one. What do you mean Demon Souls is a part of the same like
Yeah.
like family of games? What the hell? Like, so I hope that they go down that route. And just closing, you guys can somebody can come in after this. I want to see some gadgets. Like I'd like to see a trickster class or something like that. I think Bloodborne experimented with that and I really enjoyed that. I know Gunnar,
yeah,
he's spoken very highly of the trickster weapons. I'd like to see that more. I'd like to see the tools from Sekiro or something like it be some sort of class in Elden Ring. That would be sick. If that exists, it might exist. And whoever's listening to this might say, "Oh, gee, this guy's a dumbass." That was in trailer 3. Well, I haven't seen trailer 3 and I've stayed away from information on the game in the first place. So, you know, that's
yeah.
why
Same.
I'm saying
Like
this.
my information is very limited, but
This is a
piggyback
speculation
off,
video. So,
yeah, yeah,
but go ahead,
but
Esoteric.
yeah, to piggyback off your point, like I would love to see classes have their own skill association. So like, um, let's say if you're playing class ninja, like as you stated, they would have some form of skill sets that Sekiro had, like parrying and things of that nature, as opposed to like uh a knight that's really good at like pushing back enemies and stuff like that. So it would be really interesting to see that. Um, I would love to see them be a little more diverse with the amount of configurations that they do allow you to have for for this game, as opposed to the other ones.
See, like, I hear what you're saying, and I don't think you mean it this way, but I kind of don't want super bottlenecking of classes where it's like if you pick the ninja class, you can only parry, and like a mage can't do that, or a knight can do like a shield bash, but if I pick a cleric, I can't do that. What I like about the Soul series is that everyone has access to everything. So like you can pick up a katana and you can still what 3 added for those who played 3 was because they had an MP bar, they had things called weapon arts, which took that MP bar, and each weapon had a different art associated with it. So I'd like that to stay on the weapons. I wouldn't like that to be relegated to a class because if I want to kind of modify my build while I'm in the game, I want to be able to have access to like a great sword all of a sudden if I want to modify my build. It might not be efficient, but I want to have that option. So I don't want the class I just want the classes to remain like they've been in the Souls games where they're a starting off point for people who just want to immediately go hyper specific, but still have the freedom at any point in the game to kind of modify my build and change it and then still take those weapons that I found and still be able to use them.
Well, you're not worried. Well, not that it would really matter because people play the game naked once you get used to it. But you wouldn't be worried about things just being like kind of like super busted, where it's like, oh, if you have this and you could parry, and then you combine it with whatever, like just combine it with like some form of magic. If you parry, the parry lets you do, I don't know, gives you like an instant charge on a spell or something like that. Where it's like, all right, well, cool. I'm just gonna use this, and my spells are separated, but I can use this to like parry or do like a ninja dodge, and then I instantly get to do this big spell, and I just play the game like that forever.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how the combat works in Elden Ring. I'm kind of
I didn't play 3, so that's why I'm just like,
okay. Well,
if that would have been a fear, if it's like, oh, I'll just do this busted combination of things, and then this is kind of the way to play.
okay. Well, I guess I should click because you never played 3. The weapon arts they were tied to the individual weapon. So a great sword would have a different type as a club, as an axe, as a great axe, so on and so on. But what made you or what stopped you from becoming too overpowered was that like everything in the Souls games, they all scale off of a stat. So just because I can pick up an axe I might not have the strength. An axe might take 20 strength, and I started off as a mage, so I have 10 strength, and it might be a waste of souls or exp investment to get to the 20 strength just to gain access to the axe. So what stops you from becoming this overpowered mess that can wield an axe, a greatsword, a staff, a katana, and shoot pyromancies is that all these things scale off of different stats, and if you spread yourself too thin, you won't be able to use any of them effectively. So
Okay.
I don't I don't know if Elden Ring. I'm going to assume the Elden Ring is going to follow that logic where
Yeah,
things
that will
scale.
still be applied.
Yeah, so I don't see me like unless they specifically have a weapon combination that says if I roll at the last second instantly charges a spell, then to me, that's just a weapon dedicated to mages or mage hybrids. That means that's intentional. They wanted people to do that. But if they stick with the same formula, you're not going to be able to do that because you're just going to be spread too thin and you're not going to be effective at anything. So you won't be broken. If anything, you'll have a harder time
You'll
at the
be at a
game.
disadvantage. Yeah.
Yeah, you might have to start over because your stats are so spread. And who knows if there's going to be a respec option. I know Dark Souls 2 had that. That's the only Souls game that has that. No, that is incorrect. Dark Souls 3 has it, but you have to enter a covenant in order to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, 2 was just you needed an item. 3 you had to enter a covenant. So if they add a respec option, then you can like, you know what? I actually really like this dual greatsword that might be in the game. so you can respec then. But if you're stuck at that build and you just start, I want a little bit of everything, you might have to start over because you spread too thin. So I don't think that's going to be an issue unless, like I said, they have a weapon specifically that does, like an example you gave of insta charging a spell. For
Yeah.
all I know, something like that might exist. There have been items in the Souls games that have benefited mages, like Scholar's Candle from the third game, and I don't remember the name of the gear, but Scholar's Headband, which gave you 10 points in intelligence, but made you take, I think, 20% more damage. But those are just stat increases. Those don't change how the game works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just went like on a whole fucking like min max rant because I like doing that in video games.
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
is
nothing
true.
wrong with that. I didn't want to. I didn't
Yeah.
want to
Gotta
like
be
interrupt
gotta
you.
be efficient.
Yeah, I have a really hard time just kind of playing things. I have to overanalyze a game and, make sure it's worth my time in a video game to equip this piece of gear or not. So
So
it's a
I'm the
character
complete
flaw.
opposite, and we've had this conversation. I
Yeah.
think maybe recently. I'm the complete opposite, dude. Like I play games blind. Like I don't like to have too
Same.
much
I like to figure
information.
shit out.
I wish. I wish I could do
I
that.
mean, for a lot of reasons, some people, and I've had this conversation with other people where, they just don't understand. They're like, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, don't you feel like you're, like you said, inefficient? Don't you feel like you're wasting your time? And it's like, well, if you want to get technical, the
Yeah.
hobby in itself is arguably a waste of time, right? Like the whole point to me is the experience, like the journey. Like beating a game is great, but like being able to like sit here and talk about the experience, I think is more valuable to me. Like, and we had,
Same.
Zeta wasn't here for that, but last week when we did our podcast recording in between episodes, we got into like a whole Final Fantasy 11 conversation about our experiences with that game, bad and good, mostly bad, but they were memorable is the point, and that game is, or it was, very poorly designed, and I only played it for like maybe 4 months, and I have like an obscene amount of stories about that game compared to games that I've played for years. So
I don't know what you mean. Dying in Loon EXP and de-leveling is a great. More games should add that in.
yeah, I don't know if that's gonna fly too well nowadays, but
We'd see some interesting articles about that one. Just saying.
yeah, but
Well, I mean,
anyway,
I was just gonna say to like, do you? Because I'm kind of in the same boat with Gunner. Do you think that maybe the reason you're like that is because of the type of games you play? Because obviously, me and him play more RPGs, and being wrong is more of a nuisance than missing
Yeah,
a
that's a
platform.
good
I
point.
think that's
Yeah,
a
but
good,
yeah,
that's a big part. That plays a big part because we've talked about like you've told me about like certain mechanics in like old Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy 8 or Final Fantasy 7, where it's like if you make like poor decisions, you're like basically locked out of beating the game. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah.
can't afford to do that. And yeah, to your point, I think that's a huge reason as to why you guys are like so research focused and not so like carefree as me and Esoteric are. Where because the games I play, it's mostly like skill based. It's like not the
it's trial and
not the
error.
RPGs come up
Yeah.
like they're not skill based. Like they require skill, obviously, and intellect.
Yeah, no, but it's obviously a
But it's
different.
like it's a different kind of skill, right? Like
It's way more analytical. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's
And
it's analyzing. Whereas the games that I play, action adventure, beat 'em up, platformers, those are like executional, right? It's all about trial and error, mastering the obstacle, versus being able to speed run the obstacle first try, right? Or something like that. That might be a bad
yeah.
example, but
And
it's the best I got. But go ahead, Esoteric. I don't mean
no,
to pry.
no. I was gonna say, also in addition to that, that's kind of our upbringing in games. Like from the initial rise of games, like there wasn't much information, distributed throughout, well, what I'm trying to say is that there wasn't no social media. Like you had books and stuff like that, but you had to pay for them. And
Yeah, we had a
we
Game
were,
Informer and
yeah,
whatever the other one was.
Nintendo Power, things of
FEMA
that
strategy
nature.
guide.
But those forms of information weren't accessible to me because one, family didn't have a lot of money, and two, I was a child, so I couldn't work. So the games that I did
And some of
play
them
back then,
flat out wrong.
they were, huh?
I said even then, some of them were just flat out wrong, so you would have paid for something
Yeah, I remember.
wrong information. So it's not
That's
like it was
true as
even
well.
accurate.
Yeah, that's true as well. So, I would think a lot of that of my play style when it comes to games, because I do play RPGs as well, not as much as Gunner and Zeta, but I still play with that same mindset of just figuring shit out. So or just, just going with the flow. So I think a lot of that would be derived from how I played games as a child. Um would you guys, well, because we all like pretty much the same age, would you guys say that that would be an attribute to that
Well,
as well, or
yeah, I mean 100%
Yeah,
because
really.
throughout my young life, it was mostly RPGs. I didn't play a whole lot of um platformers or action adventure games. Like I was playing older Final Fantasy, niche RPGs, Breath of Fire, Chrono Trigger. Like I was playing that when I was young, and you
Yeah,
know,
my only other games were Sonic and Streets of Rage 2. So it was
okay?
mostly RPGs.
yeah. And if you fucked up in those old ones, it was really easy to soft lock yourself.
I mean, that is true. With some of those RPGs, I've had to restart because I didn't know something or I
And
wasn't privy
yeah,
to.
it was things like that because it's like in Final Fantasy, it's like, oh, I want to make my white mage. I want to, I want them to also do black magic, and it's just like it's not possible. Or
How that's supposed to work.
yeah, it's like, but one is an exception because fucking everybody hits like a truck in that game for whatever reason.
Yeah,
But there were things I wanted to do in RPGs, and it's just like you can't do that, or they'll let me do it, and then it's like, fuck, I can't beat the final boss. Like, well, you're still rocking level 1 spells because you wanted every spell. You wanted your black mage to also heal, so he never got to learn fire Ga because you wanted him to learn cure, regen, protect, and so on and so on. So, there have been instances where I've just been shit out of luck and I've had to start over. So, that's definitely influenced how I play video games.
yeah. I get that. I get that.
Yeah, I think your history, like how you came up, has a lot to do with like the air quotes gamer you become. Because when I was coming up,
RPGs.
Gamer.
listen, I had an interest in RPGs growing up, and I had an interest in like certain adventure games like Zelda, but you know, for me at least, I didn't have access to certain things. I just didn't. It wasn't back then. We're all the same age. We're all in our mid 30s at this point. Back then, it wasn't like today. So this might be a hard concept for some to grasp, but you didn't everything wasn't just there, right? Like first of all, RPGs were short printed. There wasn't a lot that were out there. So even
Yep.
if you wanted them, you had to hunt for it to a degree, right? That's one. Two, I was limited on how long I can play. So I got to play 2 days, maybe 3 days out of the week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or just Saturday and Sunday for 2 hours. So my time to engage in the hobby of gaming was extremely limited. I also had a younger brother who also wanted to play, so that 2 hours became 1 hour, right? So in that 1 hour, I had to find something that was fun. In playing a JRPG, and I've played a few, 1 hour is nothing. Like you could spend an
Okay.
entire hour in menus
Yeah.
setting stuff up. And for me to do that, like Saturday and then Sunday, for me to like approach a challenge in a game or a dungeon in a game the following weekend, I forgot everything that I was prepping for the weekend before. So it's like for me, it's like, okay, well, this probably doesn't make sense. It's not really a good use of my time. What's a game that I can kind of just get to the meat and potatoes quickly and get the most out of? And that was fighting games, that was beat 'em up games, that was platformer games, that was more direct action adventure games. Which is why I
That
love the
makes
Soul
sense.
series so much, because it kind of like overlapped, the idea of like, okay, well, this is a game that requires some level of planning, but you don't have to, it's not the same as like maybe more classical RPGs where, planning is fucking important, like the most important thing. um to where a 50-hour playthrough is down the drain because you didn't invest in the right stats, or you didn't unlock this character, have this dialogue conversation with this character in this town in this point of the game. Like that shit is crazy to me, right? That was even allowed back then in design. But yeah, the Souls games kind of mix the two, where it's like it's action, but there's also like a certain level of depth that you only get in RPGs, and which is why I enjoy those games so much, and I think why most people enjoy them, because it's a perfect marriage between the two. If that made any sense, let me know. If it didn't, I'm sorry, but
No, that
yeah,
that made really good sense.
No, I get you.
you hesitated, so I don't believe you, but that's okay.
No,
Nah,
it made perfect sense.
yeah,
So
because I mean,
go ahead.
even RPGs. Oh yeah, like for example, I'm playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2 again. And that game is super like build intensive, grindy. So I'm planning like, okay, I want to get. I'm gonna use terminology, so if anybody's listening doesn't understand, my apologies. Like I'm trying to get certain blades on characters because they mesh well with the character. I'm already thinking about builds. I'm already thinking about, okay, I want to apply this weapon to this character because they're a high crit based character and I want to get their crit as high as possible because they have moves that directly benefit from that. And like this is me just staring at the character screen. Like I haven't really moved yet. This is why I'd say I'd be a bad streamer because I do this all the time. Like I haven't even moved yet. I'm on a menu looking at characters, and then maybe just like Kong said, an hour later, I'm fighting enemies and I'm playing the game. So depending on the RPGs you play, they get like that, and I love that. But I also don't want to be inefficient when I play, and you know have to start over because there's just no way I'm not satisfied with where I am.
Yeah.
So I get that. I get that. That's how you've grown up playing games, and you apply that mentality to when you're playing the Soul series, and it's cool because you have a different experience with the game than I do, and either experience is no less valid than the others. So
And it makes it more interesting anyways, because you'd be like, oh, I fought the boss this way. And you'd be like, how the hell did you do that? Because I fought the boss this way.
right, yeah,
Yeah,
like I might
yeah,
see a move, or you might see a move, and I've never seen it because I threw magic spells at it. And I was like, oh, I didn't know he had a fucking uppercut. That's crazy.
yeah, and to kind of, I guess I would say, conclude this point, it's more so how you play is based off of your fulfillment. Like if it's fulfilling for you to look at different stats and understand how to optimize a character, great. If you choose to like just rush in head first and do the whole trial and error approach, that's also great. Like, yeah, all of our play styles don't diminish the other, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Absolutely not.
definitely.
I mean, everybody's experience is. I don't mean to sound. I hate using this word now, but everybody's experience is valid, right?
There we go.
To some degree or another, right? Um, Even if it's an experience that you think is lesser or whatever, like that's your personal opinion, and that's fine. But that's why I try to open my mind to like other ideas and stuff. And I used this used to be a problem for me. I didn't really listen to other people, and I kind of I jumped to like the first judgment. But anyway, that's a whole podcast episode in itself. I'm gonna bring up one of the points that I hope to see in the game. And you guys know me, I like big things. So diversity and boss size. So I want small bosses, large bosses, really large bosses, and gargantuan bosses. I love when there's like, first of all, a whole game with full of gargantuan bosses is awesome. So like Shadow of the Colossus, Monster Hunter, I love those games, right? But I like diversity in challenge, right? Because there are certain challenges or there's a certain way you could design a humanoid character versus like a Colossus character and everything in between. And I think bringing different challenges forth makes for a more memorable game. And so what I hope doesn't happen is that they add these huge bosses, kind of like what's that boss from Demon Souls, the dragon god, right? When I first saw that, boss in the opening cutscene, I was like, holy shit. Like, that was a big moment in that cutscene, and I think a big copy seller for that game. And when I actually got to play the game and I got to that point, the boss battle was super disappointing. In my opinion, it felt very gimmicky, and I didn't feel like I beat the boss. I felt like my character had plot armor and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, kind of a thing. And it's like, I don't like this, which is why I don't like the original God of War games and why I don't like action commands, because I feel like it takes away from what the core game is typically. Like, you're not pressing, well, that's debatable. I was gonna say you're not pressing X the whole time playing God of War. Well, you kind of are, but in a different way, right? You have to put some thought into like how you're moving the character, versus doing a boss battle in God of War and you're just being prompted to press X. You're not moving. You're not exploring any of the other like tools that you've learned, like how to move, how to dodge, how to use different weapons. Like, none of that applies. It doesn't matter. Those skills are out the window. It's like taking an exam for addition, right? And you studied for algebra, and it's like, well, I know all this extra stuff. Why are you testing me on this? This is kind of silly, and this is supposed to be the big challenge. That was my biggest issue with games like that. And a lot of people don't really get it, and that's fine. Like, everybody's different, but I hope that they don't do that again with this game. Because lazy design, or to appease like a certain crowd, right? I hope they don't go down that route. So
Yeah. There was a boss like that. I don't know if it was in 2 or 3. I think it was 2. Where he was like a fire demon, and
Oh my god.
he was like, yeah, clearly Esoteric knows what I'm talking about.
Flashbacks from the stream.
I'm talking about the one with the sword, and once you get him down to a certain point, he blows even more flame, and it's chipping your damage away as you like get close to it.
He was like submerged in lava, so you never saw the lower half of his body. It
Oh,
was
you're
only
talking
the
about
top half.
you're talking about the I think it was called Demon King or some shit like that.
Like I kind of felt like that was
Dark
a big
Souls 2?
boss. I think it was 2.
Yeah, Dark Souls 2. It was the one. He was one of
oh,
the
the last guy in
main.
the fire area after the
Whole fire, like that
that,
smelting
that
fucking
stupid hole in the corner.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
yeah.
That you just
the
fought.
hole
Yeah.
killed me for sure. 2 times.
Yeah, but he felt so like gimmicky because
Yeah,
all
he
he
did.
did was just throw fire, throw different types of fire, because he was this big like fire demon.
He was like
and
an orc or like an ogre or something. Yeah, I remember.
yeah,
that.
yeah, and
Yeah, he looked like a dragon with like horns, and he would
Yeah.
occasionally swing at you, or he'll just do some like uh pattern-based fire attacks that you could
yeah, that's
easily avoid and
that's all he
things of that
did, and
nature.
it's
Yeah.
like I think that kind of is what Kong is alluding to, where like really big, magnificent, like epic looking bosses, but when you get there, it's just this static half of a boss that the adult in you knows there's no legs modeled under that thing, and all it does is just chuck fire and swipe at you. It's like, it kind of ruins the grandiose of the boss, unlike Shadow of Colossus, where it's big and it's just you gonna deal with it. So
Yeah. I
I
I
agree.
def
I agree.
I definitely agree with that as well. And to like piggyback off your point, Gunner, like uh one of the best bosses that I think they did effectively in terms of them being massive and like they were no joke, I would say I believe it was the DLC for Dark Souls 3. It was like a huge dragon. It was like a black dragon. Um throughout the throughout your like course of getting to him, he's like attacking you from the mountains. There's a time where you're up close and personal to him and he's like swinging away at you. Then you come to a point where you're like inside of the mountain. It kind of escapes me as to where you was per se, but it's like a huge dragon. He's super mobile. He's blowing fire all over the place, and it's just you having to avoid him. Get in, swing your blade when you can, and just be cautious. It wasn't like, oh, he swings, I can open up attacks easily. He he was more organic for this particular fight as opposed to the one you mentioned it too. So I hope they definitely implement more of that.
Yeah, and I'm a sucker for humanoid bosses, so I love the humanoid bosses in
I
Souls
love
and
humanoid
Bloodborne
bosses too,
games.
but too many is a problem. Like, when there's too many humanoid bosses, especially when they're back to back, it can get a little stale. in my opinion. That I kind of felt that way about Sekiro. Sekiro kind of got a little stale because like there was just so many, like you fought the bosses all the same. Like the challenge to that game was about learning their attack pattern and learning how to parry them, right? Because the whole game was centered around this parry system and this parry bar. And so when I got to the point, spoiler alert if you haven't played Sekiro, game came out like 4 years ago now. When you got to fight the Demon of Hatred, that was like a breath of fresh air. Even though he was frustrating as fuck, but it was so different. I was like, oh, this looks like a Bloodborne boss, right? Which that's a game that has like fantastic bosses in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about too, like them finding the right balance between like different kinds of bosses, because that's important to me.
Oh yeah, well yeah, bosses are the highlight of a Souls game.
sure.
If they're bad, then you're like to me that cuts like 50% of the game, if not more, in
Yeah,
half.
it's like, what are you even doing at that point?
Yeah, it's all about bosses,
Yeah.
But
bosses and sets and builds.
But here's the thing about the Souls games that I kind of saw, and I'm pretty sure you guys seen as well. It's like the bosses who are like canon to the story, they seem easier than like the side bosses that you encounter. Um
I'd have to think about that.
Yeah, I would too.
I would have to think about that. I can't agree or disagree. I'm
like
sorry. Like
okay, so
I'm sorry. I
here's
don't have. I mean, I believe that you believe that, but I don't.
no, I
I
get what
don't.
you're saying. Like
Go ahead. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, I get that you would have to look at that. So here's a perfect example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a significant difference between fighting Flame Lurker in Demon Souls than it was to fighting the I forgot his name, but
I mentioned him earlier.
the
The
boss
Dragon King.
after.
The Dragon
Yes, the
King.
Dragon
Yeah.
King.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. I agree.
It was a significant difference. There would like I felt like the fight with I think his name is Judicator was more difficult than fighting the Mantis with the Sword of Storms, I believe it's called.
Mm-hmm.
Like things like
Stormbreaker, I
that.
think.
That's the core Stormbreaker, yes, or Storm Ruler. One of
Storm
the
Ruler.
two.
Thank you. Stormbreaker's from Thor. Sorry.
Yes, yes. Um, so I feel like
Whoopsie.
they've
Got your
done
stuff
that
mixed
a
up.
lot in some of these games. In some of their games. I could be wrong, but I did see some correlations to where the main bosses were like slightly easier than the bosses that you fight to get to them. Um like for let me say Demon Souls, I was really disappointed because I was expecting big fight at the end. I was like, "Oh shit, we got here is this massive monstrosity of a demon that I'm about to fight." And then I go in there and I'm just swinging on a decrepit old being. And I was
Well,
like,
that's less.
"Really?"
So I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with some of that sentiment, but like, it it's not difficult by design. Like it's more so about what that character represents. Same thing with like Estrella, right? The girl in the final boss in the Valley of Defilement, right? She's not a real boss. Like she doesn't really do anything, right? Compared to like, well, all the bosses in that particular board was pretty subpar in my opinion.
That's
But
true.
comparatively, like, you know, obviously the other two were more engaging and more difficult, but you know, Estrella was more about, you know, how the mighty can fall too. Like nobody's immune to like, you know, stooping down to a new level. That's at least that's the message that I took from that whole encounter. So for me, Demon Souls is kind of like, it doesn't, obviously it's very different from Dark Souls, but you know, the same, and there's a lot of parallels there, but I think there's more. I don't know, I feel like the bosses had like, they all represented something, like an idea or a certain sin or a certain ideology. Like there was something behind each boss. So I could see your point though. Like, yeah, definitely the main event bosses, air quotes, were definitely like underwhelming, and they had a big build up, and it was just kind of like a gimmick battle, or you know, this like philosophical encounter. It's like, well, okay, like, and then everything else before it was just like this fucking ball busting, heavyweight, haymaker fucking boxing match between you and another guy with a giant sword. And it's like, well, this is the big boss. Like, really? This lady in a dress, or this giant demon creature is this giant thing that's like locked away at the fucking the core of the earth or whatever, and you hit a few buttons and you shoot a few fucking harpoons at this guy and he's dead. Like, really? So I get it. I understand, but maybe that's why there's no Demon Souls 2, right? For things
Possibly.
like that. So if I had to look at the bosses off the top of my head, game with the best bosses, that had like the most meaning, I would have to give it to Dark Souls 1, in my opinion. I think all the final main event bosses in that game meant something, and they were challenging. Like their challenge factor was close or equivalent to like their story importance. That's off the top of my head, though. I don't have a list of all the bosses, and we're talking about like 6 different games here. So
yeah, I felt very different
Time to go
about
for a
Dark Souls.
replay.
I felt very different about Dark Souls. This goes into my point of how magic was busted in 1, because it's just like heavy soul arrow. I took off 85% of your HP. Cool. Heavy soul arrow. You're dead. Good talk.
well, I went in there with a fucking great sword or just a short sword, and that was it. So
Right.
that's
the
different experience.
To me, the only challenging boss was Seath the Scaleless, and that's only because I needed to cut his tail off, because that's how you got the Moonlight Greatsword
Yeah.
in the first game. So I had to run around with a specific spell, because that spell, according to the game, did cutting damage. So I had to run around like a idiot, and I can die in like 2 hits to try to aim the spell downwards to cut his tail off to get the sword. Like, I would have killed him 3 times over, but I'm trying to do a specific thing. So he was the only challenging one. So
Yeah.
again, different perspectives. It was,
But overall,
Slice and
like,
shot for extra steps.
yeah.
yeah,
But no, I'm sorry. I
without
was
the
gonna
ability to
say,
free aim, mind you.
true. That is true. Yeah, but I was gonna say, even with those bosses, they were kind of gimmicky in themselves because Sif, you had to destroy a crystal. Um, the witch, like you had to go through all this crazy, like she wasn't difficult. It was the platforming aspect of it that was difficult, and you had to like destroy the arms before you got to her. I can't remember the others off the top of my head, but it was like the final bosses are usually, from what I'm gathering, significantly easier than the ones that you have to fight to get to them, or the side bosses. I mean, it could just be my experience, but that's how it felt to me.
It could
Like,
also be a circumstance of you're at the end game versus you're in the beginning of the game.
You figured out
Like your
everything that you
power
need to figure
level
out.
is high, like your experience level is high, so like you have a good grasp on the game, whereas like your first 3 hours of the game pales in comparison to like your 63rd hour of the game. Does that make sense? So
it
it could
makes
be that
sense.
too. I think,
No, it makes
I don't mean
sense.
to derail your your
Yeah,
thought
that's the whole
process,
point.
but I mean, that's just my
Fine.
opinion, dude.
Nah,
That's
that's
like
fine.
that's like my opinion, bro.
All right. Well, to go back to I guess how this originally started, I'm in disagreement. I don't want large colossal bosses. I don't even want human bosses half the time because they fall into 2 categories, like you already talked about, where it's just like it's more of a scripted event, or the human boss is doing stuff that I can't even do, and it's just like, all right, why are you being M Bison and just like psycho teleporting all over the place as just a normal person? Like, can we stop this? Or you start doing Marvel combos on me, and I'm just like, oh, okay, I didn't know he was playing a fighting game now. Was not aware. I was just used to just one tapping and rolling. But I see you're on a whole different level from me.
So I guess you want like mid-level bosses, like
I would prefer that mid level to like kind of high, because I know we had said Shadow of the Colossus as an example of having large bosses, but like the end of Shadow of Colossus is kind of the point of why I don't want giant colossal thing, because that thing is like, just like huge, but he's just like a giant skyscraper basically. You climb up on different platforms on his back and you stab him, and the only real way he's getting you off is not really him. It's the weather, because I believe it's like lightning or something that's happening.
Yeah, it's like
It
a
really has
thunderstorm.
nothing.
Yeah.
It really has nothing to do with the boss itself trying to like to deal with you like the other bosses, like the ones that's like flying around and just like taking you into the water with it to decrease your stamina faster and get you down, or the little bull dogs, whatever they're called, where they'll just like run into the wall, or they'll just like roll around, do all this crazy stuff to get you off. Like I prefer that size area of my bosses where it's just like medium to high, but not like super colossus, because they just always end up being something that's more scripted than just like a battle of skill.
Yeah, that's true. Based a battle of skill based on what you've learned in the game so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that,
But
and I agree. And the final boss in Shadow of Colossus, while I will agree, there was a level of like scriptedness, and he wasn't so much a challenge, more so the circumstance. Um, he was better than a lot of the other big bosses and like colossal bosses in other games. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, he may not be the best, but he certainly isn't the worst. But I
Yeah.
know
No,
Gunnar
he's
had a
a step
point
in the
though.
right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
No. I guess kind of where I think they might go with bosses is related to a new movement mechanic that unfortunately I saw.
Oh,
I don't know
here
if we want to.
comes the spoilers.
Saw it.
Well,
I didn't want to say anything about it.
yeah. If
Go
nobody
for
here
it,
wants
man.
to discuss,
I mean,
okay.
I'm good with it. Esoteric, how do you feel about the
Yeah.
movement
If you don't want to,
mechanic being
All
revealed
right.
here?
I'm okay.
okay. So I know there's horseback riding in the game. Like you get a horse.
Oh yes,
Um.
I saw that in the trailer, the initial
Okay. So
trailer.
it's not that.
So
So I saw like the player character on a horse. So that kind of leads me to believe we are going to see at least one or two either highly mobile bosses that require you to use the horse, or extremely large bosses a la Shadow of Colossus that I just need the horse because this guy's foot is in another country and I got to get there somehow.
well,
So
as long as he don't move like aggro, I'm okay. You
The
know,
hate for aggro will never end.
well, I don't
it
know.
definitely
From
won't.
what I've seen, the horse kind of is just another extension of yourself. So if you move left at a sharp angle, the horse just literally pulls a PS2 and just like 90-degree angle breaks its ankles to go in that direction. Um, but if that back to the bosses thing, if I can fight like another like big knight, kind of like Sekiro, where you fought that guy on horseback, but he was on a horse and you were on the ground. I
Yeah.
actually really enjoyed that fight in Sekiro. So, like, I think it could be cool. It could fall flat on its ass, but it could be cool if you have like a horseback fight where you're on horseback and you're fighting a boss on horseback and you're like racing through the battlefield and you're trying to like swipe each other off the horse, or you're just fighting on horseback. So I think like the inclusion of a horse could just open up significantly more mobile bosses and kind of take out the arena style of the previous Souls games. That might be good, but that also might be bad.
Yeah, because the terrain could kick your ass depending on where this boss is going. Because if I'm not mistaken, this is an open world game, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Like
it
they have dungeons and things like that, but it is in an open world.
yeah, so the potential environment could hinder you. So if they were to do that, I'm guessing they'll really kind of calculate their mapping. Like if it's a big boss, of course they're gonna have like not so many obstacles in your way to get to like if they're as massive as Gunna is imagining them to be, they'll probably be in like a sand dune area where there's not much trees or things like that.
No,
Um,
I think they're still going to have the arena style bosses because that's a controlled environment. So
yeah,
they can decide what's there, what obstacles if any are there, and you don't have to worry about some random gremlin that came out of the bush because we're in an open world game swiping you and killing you while you're fighting the boss. So I think bosses are still gonna be arena style, but we might have some big ass arenas that I'm fighting this giant fucking turtle dragon. I don't know. I'm just making shit up.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I would love to see what they incorporate that's new and what they bring back from the previous Soul Seki born games or
Yeah,
whatnot.
I think horseback riding is gonna add some either interesting or frustrating bosses.
Yeah. Um
So so we're running low on time, but I don't want to like limit the conversation. I'll just quickly add just these quick things real quick, and then you guys can talk about it, and then we can close, or you guys can add more. That's fine. We still have a little bit of time. So not too many cutscenes. I don't like too many cutscenes are fine, but like I don't want 30% of the game to be like me watching. I want to be playing the game. Poison level, I would like there to be a poison level of some kind because that's kind of like a staple. I know people hate it, but like
Yep.
I want it to be in the game. And I said no gimmick bosses, which we kind of already covered. And then smooth gameplay, 30 to 60 frames. Please, no fucking frame drops. I don't want a laggy game, but I mean, maybe
I've
I'm
never
asking too much.
experienced that with a Souls game.
Have you played Dark Souls 1 on PS3?
Well, my expectations were significantly lower than they are now. I have. It's just been a very long while.
So I remember getting a lot of fucking lag in that game. There was performance like that game pushed the PS3 in my from my experience. But yeah, those are the last few things I'd like to see in the game or wouldn't like to see in the game.
Right.
well to kind of segue off your point about the cutscenes, not having too many of them, Kong. What I would like to see, which has always been a staple in the Soul series, is ambiguous storytelling.
Yeah, I was
Um,
gonna say that. Yeah.
yeah, like I want to see stories like the story be unfolded through collecting items, armor, gear, etc. Um, and what I also want to see, which I'm pretty sure the community will do, is kind of speculate as to how the story unfolded or kind of like try to nest together the in-betweens and stuff because I really appreciate that. Like even a few days ago I was watching what's his name? Vati Vidya, and how he speculates as to like what's happening in the Soul series based upon the items he procured, based upon the bosses backgrounds, stories, and things of that, and the dialogue between the NPCs and you. Like I it's a nice flavor to the game, in my opinion.
The only thing that makes me kind of nervous about that is who's doing the story.
Yeah. That's what I was
Oh,
going to say.
Martin.
Yeah, like
Well,
he
let's be real
writes.
here. I don't think he wrote the story for the game. I think he wrote a few like backstories for some characters and called it a day. I don't think he was like the main writer for the story or for the game.
Okay,
That's my speculation. I could
I
be
have
dead
no
wrong.
clue. Yeah, but I know he writes novels and novels that
Sure,
explain
when he
every little
feels like
thing.
it. I mean, the
That's
man is
true.
still writing. Like he takes
It,
years to finish a book.
it'll be
Like,
Game of Thrones will be finished. Don't worry, it's coming out. I believe.
nah, man. You're telling me he hasn't finished Game of Thrones yet? He wrote a whole game in 4 years. Get the fuck out! I don't believe that shit. Like he wrote some stuff. He probably picked up some like random, like creative writing notes that he had maybe for Game of Thrones or maybe for another book project or something like that, and like just handed them to Miyazaki. He was like, "All right, you can use that. Like whatever." You know what I mean? And it was like, "Okay, well, can we use your name? Sure. Just make sure I get my 5%." Like that's what I think his involvement was, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Hey, I mean,
You need to trust the process. All right.
um, yeah. Well, we'll see. I agree with Esoteric. I kind of want the ambiguous storylines. I want to you know, I have to look for the story. I know a lot of people don't like that in modern gaming. We like the story to be spoon fed, or some people like the story to be spoon fed to them.
Nope,
But I
not
kind of
interested
like,
in that.
yeah, using my brain cells a bit and kind of thinking, wait, so this guy is pretty important to blah 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 blah. So I hope they don't remove that for a streamlined, you know, epic storyline.
Yeah, I hope they don't do that as well. I really appreciate that they give you a basis and then the rest of it is pretty much left to interpretation. And it kind of adds to the game now because it's open world, so you can probably, maneuver yourself based upon your findings with an item. Like, oh, this sword is what belongs to who? Let me find out where the hell he is. Let me look for this town, or let me look for this area that would probably give me more information on him. So, I kind of like that.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of spoon-fed storylines. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Time will tell. Well, guys, do you have any final notes that you want to add
I
while
only
we're
got
here?
two,
Go
and
for it,
we
man.
already kind of did one off the cast, which was if we was gonna do co-op or not, and that was all a resounding no. So
Well, so
my
I'm down to do co-op, but I'm not down to do it as my first playthrough. Like it'll
yeah,
be my second or third playthrough.
yeah. So
Makes
well,
sense.
my other one was going to be more of a speculation of, do we think there will be a sequel or not, or will it be a one-off? Because pretty much the record is everything is just kind of a one-off. Like there's been nothing of sequels other than Demon Dark Souls.
I don't know. That's a good question because
Well, yeah, I'm sorry to go ahead, Gunner.
no, I was just gonna say that I'm not sure of the sales numbers, but I think Sekiro did well. I know Bloodborne did well, and we still haven't. I mean, Sekiro is kind of too new, maybe. It's still in like the newish range, but we've never seen a Bloodborne 2. And you know, with game studios being bought up as of recently, I think Sony kind of maybe want another banger to get people to consider their console. So while we haven't seen a 2, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe this will be a one-off. I think it's too early to tell, obviously, but
Oh yeah, but I was just wondering, like, do we think that it will be one or not? But like I said, just the track record so far has just been ones, and then that's it.
yeah, I'm fine with that. Too many games, like too many movies nowadays, build themselves up to have or make them so open-ended because they are already planning for a fucking trilogy or an
Oh
expanded
yeah,
universe. So it's like too many movies and games nowadays are just left unfinished. Even if it's a complete game, as far as their story goes, they're so unfinished because we gotta leave room for a sequel. And I do like the Souls games because Sekiro ended. It had a start, middle, finish. Bloodborne
Yeah,
ended.
yeah,
Like, even though the Souls games are in the same universe, they all have an end. They all have a definitive start and end. So if Elden Ring, you know, if it's a one-off game and we never see an Elden Ring 2, I'm fine with that because then, barring any DLC that comes out, it's gonna be a complete storyline. I'm tired of these open-ended stories that we've been dealt with so far.
yeah, and also,
Hmm.
I feel as though by it being just a one-off, they don't have to kind of raise the bar in a sense of like, well, if they make an Elden Ring 2, a lot of people are gonna who played Elden Ring, the first one, are going to make, comparisons and stuff to that. Like, how did they raise the bar? I'd rather them just make a whole new game with kind of their um, core mechanics and tell a whole different story, whole new story.
Yeah, like I said, I'm down for DLC because Bloodborne had
Oh
amazing
yeah.
DLC.
Oh yes, it
Dark
did.
Souls 3, the Ring City, that DLC was nuts.
Jesus Christ.
I didn't
So
play it actually. I got to go back and
it's a
Oh my
really
God.
good.
Please play it.
It
Oh
was
my God.
definitely worth the asking price when it came out.
That
For the
shit was nerve
DLC.
wracking. Y- there was for the DLC, there was no gimmicky bosses.
So like, yeah, Souls from Software, they do some good DLC. So if we get that for Elden Ring, I'm down. It gives me another reason to go back into that universe. And if it's good content, then I don't mind paying $40 for it or $50 for it. If it's good and worthwhile, then adds more to the game. But I don't need to see an Elden Ring 2. If what I'm given in February is good, then just like Bloodborne, I'll go back and play multiple playthroughs.
yeah, same here.
We'll
Agreed.
see.
And that's the thing. And this is a message. This is unrelated to Elden Ring, but that's the thing about like solid game design and really fun games. They're fucking timeless, right? Like I can go back and play any of the Souls games, even 2, which is regarded as the worst, which I think is the weakest game out of
Yeah.
the trilogy, but I think as a standalone game, it's fucking awesome. Like it's a good
I could agree
game,
with that. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but in the family of Souls games, it's seen as the weakest. But as if there was another game with a different title and it was Dark Souls 2, that game would be praised as like a masterpiece, right? Let's be real here. So
True.
you know,
True.
Dark Souls 2 gets a lot of flack, but I think it's a little like I think it's just a meme at this point to like shit on Dark Souls 2. It is a good game.
Yeah. It's just
So
competing with the other ones. That's pretty much it in
right.
comparison.
So
That's it.
I know the publishers and the executives don't give a fuck about like what a good game is and what meaningful experiences are because they only care about their bottom line.
Buddy.
So I mean, the gaming industry is not gonna change. Like it's only gonna get progressively worse as more money gets poured into it. So we're gonna see more trilogies and more unnecessary sequels. But you know, the Souls games, to my point, and to games like you know pick any Legend of Zelda, pick most Nintendo games, first party Nintendo games, they all stand the test of time. Most of them stand the test of time, and that's because they're good games. So you don't need to make a game every fucking year to satisfy the masses. Like if your game is good enough and is well designed and is given the love and care that it deserves, then people will play the game decades from now. Like I can go back and I can play Donkey Kong Country 1 right now, right? And I can have a blast playing it as though it was a brand new game, even though I beat it like 30 times. It's a good fucking game, bro. Like that's it. Like a good game you can replay over and over again. And if it's a multiplayer game, forget about it. Like endless. People are still playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So
Still playing Smash Brothers Melee.
right. So
Yeah.
like I don't want to hear the market. No. Maybe the casuals they don't see themselves replaying certain games. And they make up the majority, which is why the industry is the way it is now. But there's another side to that coin. Is the only point I wanted to make.
Yeah, and the Souls games have been really good at kind of resisting that that change in direction with video games. Like they make what they make it how they make it, and it shows when, you know, every now and then I'll boot up Bloodborne again. I've played every possible build you can. I've done the DLC, and it's still enjoyable to play it, even though I know all the bosses by heart. Like that's just the mark of a good game that's worth playing again. And there may never be a Bloodborne 2. And you know, the fanboy in me is gonna be sad because I would love to see more Bloodborne, but I can always go back to this game. It's always good.
Yeah. Look what they did to The Last of Us 2. Anyway, any other points anybody wants to make before we close this up?
I think I'm good. I'm good.
I'm good. I hit all my points. I've said everything I wanted to say and more. So
yeah, and more is right.
listen, I don't bite my fucking tongue. The whole point of this podcast is for me to vent about certain things and for us to have an interesting conversation. It's something to do, you know, every week. So
In short therapy
Alright.
session.
It's fine. We were never going to
therapy's
get
too
invited
expensive,
to,
man.
we're never going to get invited to E3 anyways. It's okay.
Yeah,
There is
Naughty
no
Dog ain't calling
E3. Let's be
us.
real. E3 is dead. All right, so I'm gonna take the silence as we're good. So, thank you guys for joining us for another episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a like. If you want to share your thoughts on Elden Ring or the Souls series or the gaming industry as a whole, you know, write it down below. We'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for more content. We release a podcast every week. Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when they publish. If you have like a suggestion for a topic, leave that down below as well. We're running low on topics, so we can use more. And if you're interested to hear a certain conversation, then I mean that's one way to kind of make your voice heard. We also stream on Twitch, so I stream under Blanka Kong. I stream every Sunday, as well as other random days of the week, depending on what my week kind of looks like. And Logical Gamers, or Esoteric from Logical Gamers, streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And he plays a lot of single player action adventure games. And he does a little multiplayer as well with Fall Guys and Splatoon 2 and things like that. So, with that being said, Esoteric, do you want to tell the people where they can find us on the socials?
Sure. So, guys, you can find us at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Logical Gamers TV. We also, in addition to that, added a TikTok as well as a Discord, which will be provided in the description down below. Also, Logical Gamers TV. Just look for the light bulb, and you're good to go.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. Hope you guys enjoyed it at home. Have a good night. Until the next one. Peace.
Peace.
Bye.